Feel Good Friday for real, if there ever was one, because Josh Harris officially owns the Washington Commanders. They closed on the deal this morning. Incredible turnout at FedEx Field for a pep rally press conference. John Allen saying, I've been waiting 7 years for a crowd like this, for the fan base to feel like this. And Harris addressed the media as well. We have that for you today here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, we're on the Team 980 on your radio, but also streaming live on the free Odyssey app and on YouTube at youtube.com/at the Team 980. And I was really impressed with Harris yesterday. I continue to be impressed with him today. And I don't say that lightly because there is a cynical part of me that when it comes to doing the job, a serious point every once in a while, how to hear yourself and, be a fan. I think people in this job can be fans. I think there's people that do it well from like a fan's point of view, but from where I sit, where I bring a little bit more of an objective lens, my nature is to catch myself when I'm going like, wow, this guy's awesome. I'm like, where's the trick? Stay diligent. And yet, so far, Josh Harris has hit all the right notes. And I think it comes down to two basic things: humanity and competence. Because Dan Snyder was the antithesis of that. He was inhumane and he was incompetent. And so far, what we've heard from Josh Harris is a healthy dose of humanity, both in a genuine humility that he gets to own this team, the excitement he has for it, and the fact that he is nervous as hell about being the steward for it, a role he genuinely sees, a term he has used, being a steward, not just someone who, it's not what Dan thought, where he's like, this is mine, it's my toy, doesn't belong to anyone else. And then there's a humanity where he talks about, I think, or a competence, I should say. The humanity part is his own humility and his desire to create a respectful place to work, to play, to coach, to cheer for. A great fan experience, the things that people inside and outside the organization really care about. And then two, on the competence front, he has talked about actual things that good leaders and good sports owners talk about, ways to create advantages, having a real strategy, understanding who the right people are, and a dedication to getting the best people in those places, to supporting the people that are in the current places to find out if that could be that person. He says today about Ron Rivera, like, we got training camp a week away and I'm excited, and, we're going to make sure Coach Rivera and Ron and his staff have what they need to move on. And I will even just say this quickly before we play any bites from Harris. I appreciated on some small level that he called everybody by their first name. Because after an administration that demanded everyone say Mr. Snyder, and it was always Coach Rivera, and it's just Ron and Jason and Josh and, Magic, and holy crap, it's Magic, and Mitch, old Mitch Rails, and the first name basis of it was very human. And I don't think that was some intentional choice. I just kind of think that's how everybody in that group is. And, I appreciate that. I had this vision in my head, if I ever met Dan Snyder and he asked me for whatever reason to refer to him as Mr. Snyder, I would have told him that I'm an adult and I will call him Dan because he's not my boss and I don't work for him. Never got that opportunity in any capacity. I met Dan Snyder once at a somewhat infamous media barbecue that he stopped by for and held court for a little while. But other than that, never met the man. He wasn't interested in meeting, frankly, anybody. If I meet Josh Harris, I'd imagine I'd shake his hand and go, hi, Josh, nice to meet you. And he'd go, hi, Craig, nice to meet you. Or he'd at least fake it if he didn't mean it. So that very basic humanity is already miles and miles and miles away from what was. As for what Harris actually said today, let's start, Anthony, right at the top with Josh Harris's message to the fans, a fan base starved for a winner and starved for some dignity and respect.
To the Commanders fans, our promise to you is straightforward. We will work tirelessly to make you proud once again of this franchise, like my family was when I grew up here. This is not going to be easy. My job is to deliver an organization that can win. It's on me and it's on us up here. Our work begins today, and I'm so excited to be on this journey together with the city. Thank you all.
And then he highlighted a couple of things that were top of mind and most important for him. One of them is the fan experience. This was a man who understands that FedEx Field stinks. And while he can't do anything about playing at FedEx Field till at least 2027, he is certainly motivated, starting immediately, so that they can try to have this better by this season in making FedEx Field the best place it can be, even within those limitations.
Yeah, so Washington fans are passionate. I knew that because I grew up here. The reaction has been overwhelming. We're so appreciative of how welcome we are. We also know, because we've done this before in Philly, that we got to deliver. So I'm also, the fans should be aware, and you should be aware, there's a lot of sleepless nights. This is an amazing day for me, but I'm stressed. So we got training camp is, the next week, and first game is 6 weeks away. Look, I think that we're going to be focusing, we got a lot to do. We got to get the team ready to win football games. We got to get out in the community and start to pay it forward, as Magic said. And we got to, change the stadium, right? And change the fan experience. We got to change the fan experience. And right now, that's going to be things like ingress and egress and food, and there's not that much we can do. And so our three priorities are those, and that's what we're focused on right now.
He used an analogy, and actually, Anthony, this might be in the next bite. I don't want to step on it, but if you're going to have people over, you could clean up the house a little bit. I used to always laugh when I was a kid because my mom would be like, so-and-so's coming. We have to clean the house. And it turned into this madness of like, we live here all the time. Whatever's good for us is not good enough for company. We have to put our best foot forward, even if it's grandma, nevertheless, the neighbors or friends that we're trying to impress. And now as an adult, you're like, yeah, I don't want people coming into my house and thinking that I'm a slob. I'm sure my wife probably heard me say that and has thoughts, but I'm working to be better every day. Anyway, the point is, Josh Harris is going to do what he can with FedEx Field, and that's making sure on a baseline level, for instance, stuff works.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of work, obviously, a lot of work. And in sports franchises, winning is not easy. There's 31 other owners that are well-financed. They want to win. Everyone wants to win. And so that's going to be a lot of work. And, it's sort of a village of people supporting a group of players and a coaching staff. Changing the fan experience, we're going to make a dent in it as fast as we can, but some of that's going to take a while. Like when you go into someone's house, we now think of the stadium as our house. So we gotta make it good for people who visit. And then getting into the community also takes time. So this is all going to take time. The opportunity is unbelievable. I mean, the Commanders used to be the number one. It's hard to imagine, and I've seen the numbers, right? The Commanders were the number one franchise in the NFL. Back when they were the Redskins, and even after that, not the Dallas Cowboys, the Washington Redskins, the Washington Commanders. So the opportunity is up here, and the work is up here, and that's just fine for us. That's what we're about, and it's gonna take a while. We ask, look, I know everyone's impatient. We're impatient. Believe me, I'm sweating this more than anyone else out there. But it's going to take a little bit of time.
That sweat is something that I just find really refreshing. Like, he feels this. Yes, it's awesome that he got the team, but now you got to run it. Like, you work so hard to get a job, and then you got to do it, and that job is hard. And we've all had that on varying levels of our lives. If you're an adult who's done any kind of job, you have to work to get it, and then you have to do the work of doing it. And when that is revitalizing, rebirthing a once proud franchise that a metropolitan area of somewhere between 6 and 10 million people, depending on where you draw the line, cares about immensely, with the eyes of the sporting world upon you for having just made one of, if not the most expensive sports purchase in the history of the world. Yeah, you should feel some pressure. That's good. That's not me like putting pressure on Josh Harris. That's me acknowledging Josh Harris has a pulse. But there's little things along the way that matter too. And that goes back to the house analogy. Later he expanded on it. He's like, your TV's got, like if you have people over for the game, the TV's got to work. You can't have couches with broken legs. We can fix that stuff, and we will. And I think that acknowledgement of details big and small is why I hear giant grand proclamation, day one, alert the presses. I think Josh Harris is going to be good at this. Like, I think the Commanders are in very, very good and capable hands. And they're not just in Josh Harris's hands. Throughout the show, you'll also hear from Mitchell Rales. You'll hear from Magic Johnson, who will play essential roles here. But we also know that the football matters a ton. And frankly, to the audience of a sports radio station, all of you, it's the part that matters the most. There are people who don't care as much about the football, but just want the team to be a good part of the community. They love that the team does stuff at their kids' elementary school or whatever opportunities may come out of having a team around town, the gift and toy drives, the whatever it may be, charity work or otherwise. But for the football, Josh Harris also has a plan, things he can take from his other teams. You'll hear what that plan is next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980. show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Clinton Yates. Clinton, my good friend, my pal. Of course, DC native, ESPN's Around the Horn, joins us coming up at the bottom of the hour. And then we are in for a special treat. He's been nice enough to do this twice within a couple of weeks. Don Van Natta is going to spend almost the entire 5 o'clock hour with us. He's got to go a little bit early at the end. But Don Van Natta with us for the 5 o'clock hour. And we will just relive it all from the moment that because he was the one who knew before anyone else. Don, the Washington Post did the first reporting back in 2020 on the downfall of Dan Snyder, or what ultimately became the downfall of Dan Snyder. But it wasn't until Don's report with Seth Wickersham and Tisha Thompson, ESPN, last October, that really the wheels started going in motion on Snyder being removed or forced out, or however you want to phrase what ultimately happened to him. And so I want to try to, on this day, the day that it becomes official, the sale closed this morning, try to piece together the timeline now that we do actually have all the pieces. Plus, what's next for Snyder legally, and is the team free and clear of all of that? And, what are his early impressions of Josh Harris? And as someone who talks to a bunch of owners, what do they think of Josh Harris? So we'll get into all of that and probably, frankly, more with Don Van Natta coming up at 5 o'clock, the Pulitzer Prize winner with us on the Team 980. Continuing right now, though, with more from Josh Harris and taking a look at the sporting side of things. And, of course, Josh Harris is not new to this. He owns the Devils. He owns the Sixers. He also has a stake in the English Premier side, Crystal Palace. But what can he take from specifically the Devils and the Sixers into the Commanders, and as he tries to build a champion here, which they made, by the way, for all the stuff that they said about everything else, number one thing, they want to win. And so what did he have to say about what he's learned and how it can help them do just that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think obviously what I've learned from, the Sixers, the Devils, and other things is that you win championships with the best people in the front office, the best coaching staff. You win by investing. You win by creating a fan experience where people want to come out and support the team. This is really hard. And so and you win by creating an amazing culture, which we talked about, that is about respect, inclusivity, diversity. A lot of people around the table. And so we're going to bring all that stuff here to this situation. And then, look, on the field, obviously.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about the diversity piece, because unfortunately, in my opinion, there are people that hear that and roll their eyes and have all kinds of whatever thoughts about it. Diversity is a good thing because bringing in a wider swath of people means you get a wider swath of ideas, meaning you have a better chance at good ones. And listening to more people and bringing more people in to the room at the table is how you win. It is essential to winning, because if you just recruit from the same pond all the time, you just wind up with the same ideas. And the same ideas aren't getting you ahead. And so having someone like a Magic Johnson, having Mitchell Rales, having Mark Ein, but also having the incredibly diverse group of people that Jason Wright has brought into this team over the last couple of years, having Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy and the folks that they've brought in on the football side, like Martin Mayhew, having all of these people with different life experiences, different paths to the table, at the table, means you get better ideas. And of course, the best one might come from any one of them. And there's going to be discussions, and you take bits and pieces of different ideas. But I love that Josh Harris is not shying away from that in a league that has had a problem in that department. And it's not just because it's the morally right thing to do by my moral standard. It's because if you want to win, you have to have that. And a commitment to that is important to winning. And so good on Josh Harris, whether it's for selfish, purely cynical winning reasons or for trying to push the world forward in a positive way, or some combination of the two. I'm glad that he said it. I think it's really important. Bravo. But that alone does not make it so that you will win. There's a multifactorial. If you just have a bunch of people that aren't that smart around the table. Doesn't matter what they look like, where they come from. You need to have the smart, right people, which he also said. And I think that's something he definitely takes from his other sports franchises. Let's go with the follow-up bite here, Ant.
You know, Ron has a difficult job. The team has a difficult job. Wherever we can create an edge. You know, obviously we've used analytics. We've used sports science. Wherever we can create an edge, you know, if we can make our players feel better, if we can accommodate their lives a bit better, if we can set up the training better, we're going to look at all that stuff. And as I said, it takes time and it takes investment. So all the sort of broad philosophies are the same. Obviously, the specifics are very different.
That's almost exactly what I expected. Anthony, we should pull up my answer from – we can't actually do this, but like what would happen if we pulled up my answer in the fake Josh Harris press conference we did earlier in the week and that answer? They'd be hella similar, would they not?
No, they would.
That last part especially?
Uh-huh.
When he's like – the philosophies are the same, the specifics are different. I don't think that's my bar, if you will, but it ain't that far.
Not at all.
And the reason is, not to toot my own horn, but it's because it's true. It's because you can take the philosophies of hiring the best people and you look at the same areas. You look at analytics on the field in terms of your style of play. You also look at them in scouting. But I love that he said sports science. And part of that, I'm not going to lie, I love that because I'm a gigantic sports science nerd, and I love that stuff, and I live that stuff. But it's also, as again, essentially important to winning. What's the number one ability, Ant? If you fail this pop quiz, I actually might give you a 5-point fine.
The number one ability is availability.
Yeah, that's right. That is correct. And you want to know how players are available? You have the best sports scientists who are making sure they get the nutrition that they need, that they get the recovery that they need, they get the fitness, type of stuff that they need in the weight room and conditioning settings. The practices are guided by the best science to actually get the most out of them. And then you mix that with the skills and teaching of a guy like an Eric Bieniemy, like Ron Rivera and his 40 years of NFL experience, like Jack Del Rio and his 40 years of NFL experience. And you mix it all together, and that is a formula for success. And if what happens ultimately is if the products don't mix well, if it turns out to be a combustible formula, not one that blends, you figure out which part is blowing everything else up and you move on. And that's why it's a big, important year for Ron Rivera and for everyone else in the building, because if you're a part that doesn't fit in and blend nicely with the formula and lead to the concoction of winning, you're going to be gone. It's as simple as that. But that sports science piece is so, so important, and frankly, an area where the Commanders haven't been as far behind as in some other areas. Their strength staff is very good. Obviously, under the previous regime, the Bruce Allen regime I'm talking about, the physical therapy part of it and all of that was real bad. It got a little bit better. They started doing the recovery room and stuff like that. But it takes an investment, and part of that also is direct from ownership. Like, Dan Snyder's cheap, and he was cheap with the team. Everyone could say, oh, he loved it, and he was a fan, and he did want to win. He didn't spend like it. He didn't invest like it. And so for Dan, or for now, Josh, sometimes it's going to be as simple as people ask for stuff and you say yes and you write the check. And some of that stuff can happen pretty quickly. Some is going to take an off season because you need to get it. You need to implement it. It's something that's better used in the off season or whatever the reason is. Or just you don't want to be disruptive, right? Like if they want to redo their weight room, now is a bad time. You can't be out of service for a week to redo it. You can do that in July, like not July 21st, July 1st. You can do that in February when there aren't a lot of guys there, some rehab injury stuff that you could always move to another facility if you need. But you can't do it in the middle of training camp. And so there's some stuff that's simply going to have to wait. However, they're already thinking about it. They're making their lists, and ultimately they will go to Josh Harris through, whoever their boss is that reports to Josh Harris and say, position coaches. These are the things that we want that will help us. Strength coaches, physical therapists, nutritionists, everybody. Hey, this is what we want and what we need to do our job best. And there's going to be an investment from this ownership group that has not been seen in this franchise in at least 24 years. And I would argue ever. And that's not a shot at any of the owners before Snyder, but people didn't invest like this the way they did back, or invest like this the way, or that way back then, right? You don't have the sports science and the medicine like dudes, Mark Schler and the Hogs back in the day. Mark's told this story before. Like, they went behind and sat on buckets and drank beers. Like, that's fine. Like, now it's like, hey, what's your super personalized protein shake with the exact macros and micronutrients that you need to recover? You didn't have to pay for that stuff back in the day. Nevertheless, the sports scientist who knew what those actual numbers were. So this is an investment, this franchise, and in that way, an update from times past that this franchise never got to keep up, to match up with teams that have been doing this for years, that this franchise has just, frankly, never had before, and I'm excited to see the results. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and joining us next for his weekly Friday visit, the one and only Clinton Yates. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And for his first weekly hit of the Josh Harris era, ladies and gentlemen, Television's Clinton Yates.
What's up, Gregory? How are you? You must feel great coming off literally the greatest day of your career this week. I just want to say quickly to everybody down there, every show, every station, look, I grew up in D.C. I've listened to everybody that was on air yesterday, and from a simple production of show status, like what happened was one thing. The fact that you guys pulled that off as, you know, a cluster, to me, was as impressive as anything else. So good job on all the hard work, Gregory. And you got to have the big moment, too.
I did. As I said yesterday, I felt very fortunate. The sale announcement did not have to come between 4 and 7, but it did. And so I made sure I was as ready as I possibly could be. It was really great, man. Credit to my bosses, because they're the ones that did the work. And it was funny because I was like, can I do this? Can I help with that? And it was literally like, no, man, do your show. Focus on the show. And so we did the show, and it seems that well received and that we did a good job.
That's why you get in the radio, by the way, kiddos. Television stations aren't putting events on like that. Your local podcast is at a freaking bookstore. They're not out there getting after it at the bullpen. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's literally why a lot of us got into this business, because you just might have the chance to do something like that, and you nailed it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, it's funny because the only thing that I can really remotely compare it to is the night the Caps won the Cup.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Nats winning the World Series did a little bit or similar as well. For me, that just happened at a time of year that I was still on the beat and in full football mode. The Caps win the Stanley Cup in the middle of June, where I'm available to do non-football things. And so I happened to be at Capital One Arena. Obviously, they win it in Vegas, but I was there at the watch party. And it is the only night of my career, the only day of my career that remotely comes close to yesterday. And the fact that it is a team sale, like, they're always a big deal from a news standpoint, but it just underscores how important it is for the city to get their team back, to rebuild that sense of community, that it goes from this guy that everyone hates to someone that gives you hope.
I would almost go far as to say it's a rebirth rather than a rebuild. You know, one of the things that's been interesting about not being in D.C. and kind of divorcing myself from what the franchise was with Dan Snyder was that you got to get a look at how much people actually cared about that franchise and whether or not they really had much of an impact. And the truth is that they didn't. And the secondary truth is that that's actually probably a good thing. If you were a fan that stuck around D.C. and around FedEx Field and around Ashburn, and I don't know, even went to Richmond, Gregory, you are the kind of person that has the dedication of a fan that I don't know how well rivaled you are in the NFL right now. And so looking at this as a rebuilding, I don't actually even think makes sense. This has to be something new. You are effectively a franchise that is an expansion team at this point, because you're not in a position to really celebrate the past for obvious reasons, but at the same time, so many people have left that you're basically starting from scratch, and that is not a knock. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that to me is a position of strength in the concept of, if you were there, you're a fan. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no bandwagon humans that are saying, oh yeah, I was there this, I was there that. If I was still in DC and I was still a Commanders fan, those people would be getting rejected for the simple reason that, look, you can come back to the squad in terms of what you believe in terms of the burgundy and gold and all that, but like, there are people that did the dirt. All right, we know those people, and I am very proud of them right now. And the reason I bring that up is because your friend Mr. Harris better be listening to those people when it comes time to start anything as far as how that franchise operates. Never mind what happens on the football field. Showed up, showed out.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say, though, where it's not, it can't be a complete start over, because that ignores the immense passion. And I think being there yesterday, like, you feel that you don't get that excitement for an expansion team, right?
No,
like, there's something.
Let me jump in there quickly, Craig.
Yeah,
I know, but that's why it is in your own mind. It's it has to be that way, because that's basically where you're starting. But it's going to be the best expansion situation you've ever seen. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's only sort of in name, in the context of you're getting a fresh start, not because nothing that's ever been there. Think of the Browns, for example. Not a dissimilar sort of situation. Their team left. Literally went to Baltimore. They kept the rights, and when they came back, that wasn't an expansion team, but it was. This is more akin to that, is what I'm saying, Craig, than it is, say, the Jaguars showing up on a helicopter in a field that nobody's ever heard of. You know.
Yeah, no, that the Browns is actually a really great comparison. It just gave me a segment idea. We'll probably have someone from Cleveland on next week, because that's a really interesting one. But it also, like, it hit me really hard yesterday because we had Doc and we had B. Mitch on the set, and Doc told a story of how when he came as a player, like, people he didn't know would just be like, you come over for dinner, and like that sense of community, and that's why he has been so staunch in supporting the players players through all of this. And it's like, I want them to have what I had. I want them to experience what it's like when this team is cooking and when it's something that the community is proud of, because there's just an openness and a togetherness that is pretty unique in sports. And I was really touched by that yesterday, and Brian saying some of the same things as well. For you personally, we've talked so much about this over the last 8 months, and I'm just curious when the moment hits, like when the news comes across. I don't know how you consumed it, whether it was Adam's tweet or listening in or whatever it was, but like the moment hits, Dan doesn't own the team anymore. As someone who, as a fan, kind of left.
Yeah.
Like, how did it hit you?
I was happier for you guys, than anything. I mean, if I'm being honest, this is one of those deals where something that is supposed to have been, how do I say this? This is one of those where something that you've wanted to happen for a long time. As time went on, as the world evolved, as the court cases added up, as the controversies hit more headlines, this became far less about football and what I even cared about than it became about the humans that I knew in town that had their lives ruined as a result of this franchise. And so for me, this was ultimately a story of some level of vindication for all of these people who basically bought into the goodwill of the franchise, bought into exactly what you referred to in terms of the fan base loving the team, but unfortunately were screwed by the greed and avarice of small men. I got to say, I might have to retire the term Ashburnistan, and not out of any sort of joking, but like that's what this was about. It was about that ownership group and the fact that they couldn't get out of their own way, the greed and avarice of small men ruining a once proud nation. By the time it got to the announcement, it was like, okay, finally, Nixon, get on the helicopter, get out of here. You know what I mean? And we had already understood what the effects of him being around this long were. So, yeah, there was some relief, but ultimately I'm happiest for the people that hung around, that stayed, that not only did not give up, but fought back while still rooting for what they loved. That was something I did not have in me. You know what I mean? And for those who did, well, now's your reward, and you deserve it. It's as simple as that.
For sure. Amen. Period. New. Not just new paragraph. New chapter. You still really like football. Like we're friends. I know this about you. You really like football
enough, but
it's not just like the X's and O's and stuff, but like the drama of the sport, like what makes it fun to talk about on television and radio and in group chats and amongst buddies and the whole deal.
Correct.
Like, do you think that you will find yourself rooting for the Washington Commanders when they take the field on Sundays in the dump that will eventually be replaced and other stadiums around the NFL?
As much as I will root for any team in, I guess, the NFC, why not? I mean, the bottom line is that that's the stadium that I grew up learning about sports in general in terms of going to RFK. Not that they're playing there, but, there's a large part of me that my love for football died when Sean Taylor passed as well. So my stance on the game has kind of moved backwards, but I do enjoy hanging out with my friends and enjoying the team that they enjoy. I'm always rooting for that team for the sake of the fans. And that's everybody I grew up with, everybody who still lives there. Am I going to be out here wearing burgundy and gold? No, I don't even live there anymore. You know what I'm saying? I'm in Los Angeles. I act like I'm a Bolts fan just so I can, tell people something stupid in the bars. But ultimately, I root for the league in general as a fan now, just in terms of what I watch and what I consume for my job. However, I will say this. I'll bet there are a lot more people that are willing to come back, but they're going to be slow because of all the things we still the scars are still fresh if you were a football team fan, but not necessarily a huge football fan. There were a lot of those people that existed and still continue to exist in the DC metro area. And that was the whole thing about how so much of the fan base got pushed back. It was the people who were like, all right, man, I'm just here to kind of have a good time. I'm not here to be arguing about whether or not the team name should change because it should, whether or not you're respecting people in the front office because you're not. Like, all of that had people out of the door well more than the football. And so I think the football, to your point, Craig, will make it the easiest to return if they're good. Now, our close personal friend Mina Kimes is big on their defense. We'll see what happens. But I will caution people to say, to understand that running a football team, winning Super Bowls, still mega difficult. Okay, this is not going to necessarily be some contender just because Dan Snyder is gone. I look forward to what Harris can do, and more so than anything, from a expansion franchise point, if you will, I'm just interested to see how everything kind of off the field goes. Like, what is this going to look like? Who is going to be in the front office? What are you going to do on game days? Like, on the most basic granular level, because we have been tilling this bad soil for multiple harvests, Craig. You know what I'm saying? Can the farm still grow crops is what the question is, and it'll be fun to see.
That is a heck of an analogy. Clinton Yates with us here on the Team 980. All right, Mr. Los Angeles. Magic Johnson is also part of this ownership group. He does an interview on the Today Show this morning. It is very clear to me that he is going to play a significant role here and the community building and the things that he is wonderful at and has been for decades at this point. You have a front row seat to that with how he does it with the Dodgers and the Sparks in Los Angeles, not to mention he is, Mr. Los Angeles.
Right.
So what role does Magic have here, and what are some of the things that they've done with the Dodgers to ingratiate themselves in the community, and how do you think those things will work in Washington?
Well, I would say more importantly that what Magic brings to the table is not just what he's done with the Dodgers or the Sparks, it's what he's done with his actual businesses. Right. Magic Johnson is a businessman in a lot of Black America, and that credibility alone, which are not things you're necessarily going to see. I mean, we know about his movie theaters and therefore so on and so forth, but what it brings is the credibility in communication, and that is not just locally here in Los Angeles. That's not just nationally, as it would affect the D.C. area. That's globally. If Magic Johnson walks into the building, everybody is paying attention to what he has to say. And not just because he's a superstar, because he's a fantastic businessman and he understands what it takes. That is the level of credibility that I would go so far as to say this franchise has literally never had. All right? The Squire Jack Kent Cook was not some up and standing individual known as a relative huckster in the overall scheme of things. Let's be real. Magic it's not about him being the primary owner. It's not even about him being the face of the franchise. It's about the fact that he has the connections, has the track record, and has, for lack of a better term, the receipts to show you as much. It's hard for me to say this without sounding like it's sort of a tokenism thing, because it's not. But Magic is simply a guy you want in the room, because that has ultimately been one of the biggest problems of what the Washington football franchise has, is you thought to yourself, there was nobody here to say no to this. There was nobody here to tell you this was a bad idea. There was nobody here to suggest a better way. I think that Magic's credibility, not just in terms of himself, but who his team is and who he decides to be a part of things, is exactly what it is. The brother was a superstar as a player, superstar champion, global representative in basketball, and a tremendous businessman in America. No reason not to let him have any say that he wants in the entire process.
All right. Last thing for you on the way out, unrelated to all of this. The Women's World Cup thread continues here.
Yes.
If you know, you know. Most excited thing, or most thing you're most excited about for the U.S. tonight / in this tournament as they take on Vietnam, first game of their title defense.
It's got to be Crystal Dunn. There's some controversy over the fact that she was not named a captain on this team, and by some controversy, I mean we are very pissed in this household. That's another story. But she's at a stage in her career now where sort of all of this nonsense about her being an up-and-coming next, this, that, and the third, that's all out of the window. She is the veteran. She is a mother. She is arguably one of the more calming presences on any team in this tournament. Never mind just the U.S. women's national team. And they're starting tonight in the debutantes against Vietnam, which is another story just in terms of how great this tournament is with all of the new teams. There's 8 new teams. The Philippines had a nice little matchup last night against the Swiss. Terrible penalty call in that match, by the way, that went against the Filipinos. But I'm looking forward to Crystal Dunn's tournament. I really am. I think it's a position where you do not see women who look like her in leadership roles that people know going in there are going to be in leadership roles in international tournaments. She unfortunately, in my opinion, I'll repeat it again, got slighted as the captain, but she's the lifeblood of that team in many ways for a lot of these youngsters who are on that squad that are making their initial caps into these forays of tournaments. And so she's the guiding light of the squad as far as I'm concerned. I know that there are people who people consider better players in terms of Morgan, et cetera, but as she goes, temperament-wise, attitude-wise, never mind skill-wise, I think that's very much what this team is going to define themselves as quickly. I just want to point this out. Tamara Nickel wrote a profile about her in Anscape. I pledge you to go check that out. She was with her over many months. You'll get an idea into the inside of what's going on in Crystal's mind heading into this tournament.
Crystal's mind's a funky place. I've sat down with her before. She's a character.
She is.
In the best possible way.
Right.
Like, I don't know how we got her to sit down. Well, I do know how we got her to sit down for an hour. It was because my podcast co-host on the Train with the Best podcast was her trainer at the time.
I was going to say, because you have a personal relationship.
But
that's
getting Crystal to literally sit still for an hour is damn near impossible because she tends to squirm a little bit.
Active human.
She is an active. That is a good way to put it. She is an active human. And I will say this on like the captaincy front, it's ridiculous that she wasn't already like part of the co-captaincy, right? Like Becky Sauerbrunn, nobody doubts that. Lindsay Horan's a phenomenal leader and you know was already a co-captain, but there's no reason that Crystal wasn't a third part of that triumvirate and thus with the armband. But I heard Lindsay say recently in an interview like one of the people she looks to as the captain is Crystal. They played together in Portland for a long time. Yeah, she should have the damn armband. But there's no doubt within it doesn't make sense. I'm admitting that. Okay. But within the team, she is definitely someone that is incredibly well respected and looked at and important for all the reasons, whether there's a piece of cloth around her arm or not.
Can I just say this? And I know you've got your USA jersey on right now for those of you who are not watching on YouTube. This tournament expanded features not only a bunch of, we'll just say Americans who are playing for their home nations, not only a bunch of players from NWSL teams, but again, there are a lot of players globally that are fantastic and contribute to this game, specifically the women's game, that are worth paying attention to. It is not necessary to go full jingoistic on this to enjoy it. You can watch the tournament, y'all, the tournament, as we like to say on Horn, and enjoy this on a lot of levels, okay? The quality of play in women's soccer, especially on the national team level, is as high as it's ever been in my mind. So, you know, if you want to go out there and root for the red, white, and blue, that's one thing, but you're missing out on a good tournament if you don't want to pay attention to only people that are wearing, you know, what you're wearing right now.
Yeah, I will watch as many games as my sleep schedule and the New Zealand time difference allows.
West Coast helping me out on this one.
That is major for you. Yeah. This happens to be the jersey of a personal friend Ashley Sanchez, so you know we're rocking that.
All right, that's enough name drops for you for one segment.
You know, it's just I live in that world, man. It is what it is.
I hear you, brother.
You know what world you live in? Television. That's
Correct.
Television's Clinton Yates. You can watch him on Around the Horn. Of course, and also you're doing some LA radio. I know today as
I'll
well.
I'll be on the air later today. Not that anybody wants to hear that, but I'll be on from 4 to 6 Pacific. ESPN LA.
What are you guys talking about? No, okay, that's enough.
It's Otani talk. Otani talk.
Oh, that's true. That's true. That is big. I don't think it's much of a topic here. I don't think we're going to be in the mix. The old Washington Nationals.
The Orioles have an outside chance of looking at him, but that's another discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps that's next week's discussion. All right. Thanks for coming on as always.
Goodbye, Gregory. I'm glad you're in DC.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to the Hoffman.
Thanks, pal. It's Clinton Yates, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. The only other detour we will take today away from Dan Snyder, outside of that, somewhat in terms of the length, unplanned detour with Clinton there, is to preview the U.S. women's national team's game against Vietnam tonight. Get their tournament preview set with our guy, Andre Carlisle. That'll be at 6:30 later in the show after much more from Josh Harris. Today, you'll also today on this show hear from Magic Johnson, hear from Mitchell Rails. Incredible stuff from them from FedEx Field. If you haven't heard it, you've heard about it. And even if you heard it, you probably want to hear it again. So that is coming up in just a little bit. But next, there is one on the journalism front. There is one name that has stood out in this story. And that is, in some ways, unfair because the amount of great journalism done is almost hard to remember, starting with Will Hobson, Liz Clark, and that crew with the Washington Post, Mark Maskey as well. All the great work that Mark and Nikki Jabvala have done, and Liz was in on a lot of those stories before she ultimately retired. The New York Times had really important, essential pieces of reporting throughout the entire process that leads to the downfall of Dan Snyder, leads to today where Josh Harris signs on the dotted line for the Washington Commanders as a team. But ESPN's story was the one that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And for some people in the league, it's the one that made them realize there was really actually a camel there in the first place. The man at the center of that, along with Seth Wickersham and Tisha Thompson, was Don Van Natta Jr. And that man has been gracious with his time throughout coming on this show, talking about his reporting. And so we figured to celebrate the day that Josh Harris takes over as the Commanders, what better way to do it than to bring Don back on one final time, at least for this chapter of Washington football team history, and relive it all. How did it start? How did we get here? When did he know this was headed in the direction that Dan Snyder was on his way out of the NFL? We spend most of the next hour with Don Van Natta next here on the Team 980.
You can listen to the Team.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 5 o'clock, you know what that means? And there's no one better on a day like today than our guest for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
He's the man who wrote all the stories, and thus he's the right man to talk about the story. If you're watching on the stream, you already see the face of a man who perhaps is now a cult hero in D.C., despite the fact that he's wearing a Mets hat right now. But we will forgive him. Don Van Natta Jr., Pulitzer Prize winning journalist from ESPN. He who broke open this story and led to this day. And Don, I will ask you a little bit later about some personal reflections on this when you work on a story like this and the consequences are so large. But I'd love to just go back to kind of the beginning. Like, Dan Snyder's been a thorn in a lot of people's sides for a long time. But to know that there is something here that warrants an investigation, the kind that you did with your writing partners, Seth Wickersham and Tisha Thompson, early on, these first stories that you put out, when did it first get on your radar that there was something larger than him being incompetent and annoying and whatever other words other owners would use to describe him?
Well, I got involved in the story last summer. Actually, it was this month. It was in July of last year. I had just finished a profile, a big investigative profile of Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball. And it was Seth Wickersham who called me and said, look, we're working on this, both Seth and Tisha Thompson, on an in-depth Dan Snyder piece. Would you like to jump in and join us? And I said, absolutely. And one of the first interviews I did after getting that assignment was with somebody who knew that Snyder had gathered dirt on his fellow owners and on Commissioner Roger Goodell. And to be honest with you, Craig, it was that quickly that I felt like there's a lot more here, because that's sort of crossing the Rubicon with the owners. If you are a partner and you are actually talking openly with other owners that you have dirt, and if somebody tries to take away your beloved franchise, remember that was the context, and Snyder was saying the NFL is a mafia and he has enough dirt to blow up the entire place. If that happens, that's something that rubbed the owners, I was guessing would rub the owners the wrong way. So, we did our due diligence on that story. The story was published last October. As you'll remember, just a week later at a league meeting, Jim Irsay came out and said we have to take a much closer look at Dan Snyder and his leadership. And it was just a couple of weeks after that Dan and Tanya Snyder announced that they were going to sell the team. But from my perspective, from talking to the way that story landed with owners and team executives around the league, a lot of people did not know that Snyder was talking that way and was saying that he would literally blow up the league if they tried to take his team away from him. And it was really probably the last straw. He didn't have a lot of goodwill at that point, but whatever goodwill he had left, and that includes with Jerry Jones, who for a long time was Snyder's last line of defense, then that was pretty much it for Dan Snyder.
So is there a point in the writing process, or is it that first interview you're like, this could end with him actually losing the team, which is ironic considering what you're saying, right? It's if you take away my team, it's like, well, your threats are the thing that is actually going to do you in here. Did you know then, or was it not until the story hits, you see the reaction, and ultimately really Irsay coming out and saying what he did that you thought maybe he was going to be in trouble?
In the back of my mind, I felt that there was a possibility that this would be sort of the last straw for Dan Snyder among the owners, only because Seth and I had spoken to so many owners around the league once we had developed that information. If you remember, there's a quote in that story where Snyder is telling associates that all the owners hate each other. And I had run that by a veteran owner, and the veteran owner said to me, well, that's not true. All the owners hate Dan. And, and that yeah. quote really was reflective even before the story was published. But I know from speaking to quite a few people after the story landed, including some people that we did not interview for the piece, that it was a sense of the last straw. I've had people tell me, even just in the last 24 hours, that the thing that really did him in with the fellow owners was certainly that he was speaking openly, that he had dirt on fellow owners, including, by the way, Jerry Jones, who was a mentor to Snyder for years, and dirt on Commissioner Roger Goodell, but also the fact that he cost his fellow partners money. That he hid money from them, which is obviously one of the major findings of the Mary Jo White report. You cost these guys money, these billionaires, that is a bridge too far. And so I've had people tell me just in the last 24 hours, including somebody who's actually in Snyder's close confidence, that really was what ended it for him. Those two facts, as much as anything else.
Don Van Natta, ESPN, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So let's double click on that for a second. Obviously, none of this comes to light. None of this stuff happens if Melanie Coburn and Megan Imbert and the group of 40 former employees, Tiffany Johnston, do not come forward. There is no Wilkinson investigation. There is no Wilkinson investigation to bury. Thus, there is no congressional investigation. You don't get to the money without them. But just to be clear, that seems to be, based off the people you're talking to, more of a clearing of the path to the stuff that got him in trouble than the actual thing. One, is that correct? Two, what does that say about the NFL?
Yeah, it's not a good verdict on the NFL. And you're absolutely right. The courage of these women, mostly, who came forward and made these allegations at great personal peril, it can't be overstated. They're the heroes of this, not the journalists. We just did our jobs. They're the ones that really sacrificed everything. But the fact that that's in a way minimized by people who are always have their eye on the bottom line in the NFL. I mean, this is not new, right? This is not a news flash, but these owners care about money. That's the most important thing to them. And the fact that Snyder cost them money, was hiding money from them as a partner, that from what I understand was one of the big problems. Certainly the toxic workplace culture, the fact that the Beth Wilkinson investigation ended up getting buried, the fact that Congress opened up this investigation after the Gruden leaks, as we reported last week, and all the embarrassment that and the drumbeat of bad news are also factors. But other factors, getting back to the economic side, is Snyder couldn't get a stadium. We reported that in October. The fact that he had run out of options for a new stadium also badly hurt him with his fellow owners, because Washington is one of the top 5 wealthiest, economically sound metropolitan areas in the United States, and the Commanders were dead last in local revenue, dead last in attendance, a stadium that was crumbling. And I heard in the run-up to that October story also from owners that they were very, very frustrated that Snyder had run out of options for a new stadium. So that also badly hurt him with his fellow owners, and I think led to what happened yesterday.
Yeah, and as you guys reported too, with the raising of the debt limit, and all the stuff that you reported around the minority partners, it's pretty clear with the $1 billion in debt and who knows what else, that he couldn't afford an NFL team. And that's actually something that my boss put out in a tweet the other day. So CK, shout out to you, sir. But when people say he walks away with $6 billion or $5 billion because he owes $1 billion, it's not entirely true, because the team was already factored into his net worth. He has been borrowing against the team and using the fact that, hey, if I needed to sell this, I could get the cash and do it and pay for this thing his entire life. This team has funded his lifestyle for a quarter of a century. So even though he does sell and he does get a large check, or however, I don't know how transactions at that level work. It's not something I've ever personally been involved in. But it's not like he just gets fresh money. He will now have the cash to pay his debts for the lifestyle he's been living, based off the fact that he's been worth this the entire time.
Well, the allegation that was made by his limited partners that I wrote about in February in that exclusive report for ESPN.com is that Snyder was using the team as his personal piggy bank, that he was living far beyond his means. That he was even going so far as charging several $1 million to the team for the Redskins logo on his private jet. I mean, he was trying to scrape up money any which way he could. And, Craig, this is important. Part of this, those limited partners, they're all billionaires. These are not some schleppers. They own 40% of the team. They wanted the NFL to investigate through arbitration. And actually, they wanted the NFL to take the team away from Snyder. And in a matter of a day or two, Roger Goodell and Jeff Pash, the general counsel of the NFL, shut down that arbitration and said, we're not going to investigate it. I mean, one of the big stories here is how the NFL, and in particular Roger Goodell, protected Snyder at every turn. And again, the question is why? That's a question I would love to pose to the commissioner. There's speculation that maybe there is something to this thing, that there's some dirt. I've heard that in just the last, several days as well, that people still speculate on it. I don't know it well enough to report it, but that's some of the things that's being whispered about. But there were multiple opportunities for the league to hammer Snyder. Even the Beth Wilkinson sanctions, only a $10 million fine leveled to the team, and this hazy punishment's not even used. That they're not even using the language of a suspension, and because he's a member of the membership, right? He's a partner then. Fast forward to yesterday. Look at the Mary Jo White report. We have a complete report, a $60 million fine, far more for Snyder personally, as I understand it, because he's no longer in the club. And then the allegations on both financial improprieties, that he was skimming, there were 2 sets of books, all of the things that were said by Jason Friedman. Mary Jo White said that all of that was true. And obviously the Tiffany Johnston sexual harassment allegation, Mary Jo White also found that that was true, even though Snyder denied both of those allegations and stonewalled the investigation on top of it. So the way Mary Jo White's report was handled by the NFL is in stark contrast to the way the Beth Wilkinson report was, because I think the NFL was still in cahoots back in 2021 to try to push this under the carpet, move on, and let Snyder continue. And, that's something that the league really needs to answer for.
Yeah, and that they need to learn from. Don't do that again.
Yeah.
It will not work. It does not work. It will not work. It will not ever work. Don's nice enough to stick with us for most of the hour here. Some more with Don Van Natta next here on The Hoffman Show. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Continuing with ESPN's Don Van Natta. I want to circle back to some of the details in Mary Jo White's report in a few moments. But last kind of bigger picture question, Don, would be looking at the arc of Daniel Snyder's ownership. He comes in, he immediately rubs some folks the wrong way. Nobody really... There's never a point where there's good feelings engendered. At best, it was neutral. But was there ever a point in talking to owners over the years, because you and Seth have been doing reporting like this, you talk to people all the time and have for over a decade at this point, was there any point over the years that his sheer incompetence or anything else that he did had him in hot water, that when you look back on it, perhaps if we were in a different time, a different place, or for any other circumstance, could have gotten him in trouble sooner? Or did you, despite all the bickering and complaints you may have heard about him, just assume he was going to die and give the teams to his kids, however number of years from now that happens?
Well, remember, when Snyder bought the team back in 1999, the NFL commissioner then, Paul Tagliabue, introduced Snyder, who was 34 years old, lifelong Redskins fan, as the perfect person to own this franchise. But within just a few years, there were a number of owners that thought that Snyder was obnoxious, brash, did not like him. He rubbed people the wrong way. Very early on, as an owner, he tried to get the Super Bowl for Washington in FedEx Field. He went up against the very popular Bidwills, who owned the Arizona Cardinals. And at an owners meeting, Snyder was bad-mouthing the Bidwills, and this rubbed a number of veteran owners the wrong way. We reported that last October. And so I think very early on, there were some owners that just didn't like him, didn't like his style. But as time went on, to answer your question, I mean, we knew that and we had heard that, but he always had a protector in Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the most powerful and influential owner in the NFL. He's arguably maybe the most powerful person in American sports, certainly on the short list. And Jerry would light up when Dan Snyder would call him. I saw it, Craig, in 2014. I did a profile of Jerry Jones. I spent the summer with him. Anytime Dan Snyder called Jerry on Jerry's flip phone, Jerry's eyes lit up. Dan knew exactly how to ingratiate himself with Jerry, would ask his advice on business matters. Even back then, Snyder's trying to get a stadium, right? And so he's asking for advice from Jerry. I'm sitting right there, and I watched it. And I think that Jerry Jones, as I said earlier, was the last line of defense for Snyder. Once he fell, and eventually, I think he did after our story was published. Quite frankly, last October, even though Jerry said some mixed things, that was it. But I think that if it were not for the courageous women that came forward in those early run of Washington Post stories in 2020. What happened with the Beth Wilkinson investigation, and quite frankly, the bungling of it by the NFL, and even allowing Snyder to dictate the terms of his punishment, as we reported, as Seth and I reported last week, and all the fallout from that. And then, of course, the leaks on the John Gruden leaks, as we reported, also, woke up Congress and led to what happened yesterday. But if it were not for that, he might have skated, and yes, he might have still owned the team today, despite how badly he was running it, and how many of the owners had no taste for him, no use for him. If it were not for all of the things that have happened in the last year to two, those courageous women, and also some pretty tough journalism that brought a lot of things to light.
No doubt. Then we get to the Mary Jo White report, the NFL's version of accountability here. It's limited in scope, but it says a lot. It's the biggest fine in league history at $60 million. What did you make of the amount of detail in it, and were there any particular details that you found interesting? A lot of it obviously is things that you and others have reported or have leaked out throughout the process, but was there anything particularly interesting that stood out to you as the report comes out? And I guess this is now a terrible multi-part question that my journalism professor would be very mad at me for, but what did you make of the timing of it, dumping it at the same exact time that the good news comes out?
Well, let's talk about the timing first, and then I'll talk about my impressions of the report. The timing was not surprising at all. I think I said on another podcast yesterday in the afternoon that I predicted it was going to come out today. The only thing I got wrong was the day. Obviously, the fact it came out in a matter of just a few minutes after the owners voted unanimously for the sale to go forward. It's cynical. It's what the NFL does. The Beth Wilkinson punishment, I'm using air quotes for that, came out, just a few days before the July 4th holiday weekend. I remember the Ray Rice report in 2014, which was very tough on Roger Goodell, that was done by a judge, came out the day after Thanksgiving. I mean, it's like on Black Friday. So the league is very, very good at putting out bad news in a way that it is going to be overshadowed. And the play here was obviously Josh Harris taking over the team was they figured was going to eclipse the details in the 22-page Mary Jo White report. Now, my impression of that is, all the way down the line, she hammers Dan Snyder. She finds that Tiffany Johnson is credible and that there was sexual harassment there. Remember that Tiffany Johnson only came forward because of the congressional investigation, first made that allegation at that roundtable in February of 2022. And that was a large reason why Mary Jo White was hired by the NFL to investigate. And obviously the Jason Friedman whistleblower allegations, all the way down the line, she finds that absolutely, for a number of years, systematically, Snyder was personally involved in cooking the books and having two sets of books and hiding money from his partners to the tune of at least $11 million. And if you read the report carefully, it could be as much as $55 million, which $11 million to billionaire owners does sound like the coins in a couch, right? Kind of sounds like chump change, but $55 million is certainly a lot more and enough to get their attention, but it's the principle of the thing. And, there's this one quote in there about, man, if we got caught, we'd be put in the NFL's jail, which jumped out at me because actually, Snyder was caught, and he was not put in the NFL's jail. The NFL continued to allow him to continue to do these things and look the other way at the allegations of his former limited partners that were far more serious, that he took out a $55 million loan without their knowledge, which is now being investigated by federal prosecutors in Virginia that we wrote about last February. So, my impression is that Mary Jo White had far more leeway. There was a far more appetite in the NFL league office for Mary Jo White to get to the truth of Dan Snyder, which is why she hammered him. I think with Beth Wilkinson, there was no report. It was only a summary. We know that Snyder contributed to the press release. He actually helped write the press release that the league put out, as we reported last week. So it was a very different time only 2 years ago, the way the NFL dealt with Snyder with kid gloves, than the way they dealt with Mary Jo White's report. They wanted this to be a tough report, and it was.
Donovan Natta, ESPN, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So what are the loose ends now, Don? Mary Jo White wraps up, very conclusive, as you said, but there's still the Eastern District of Virginia. There's the Gruden email stuff. I might be missing one or two. What are the loose ends that still remain for Dan Snyder before my audience can be as happy as a pig in you-know-what, because they never have to hear his name again?
There's the investigation in Virginia. In the Eastern District of Virginia, there's federal prosecutors that are investigating the financial improprieties side of this. I believe they're looking at the Jason Friedman allegations, and if they're not, certainly is a blueprint in the Mary Jo White report where there could be things that would interest them there. We know that they're looking at the allegations that were laid out in the arbitration petition that was filed by Snyder's 3 former limited partners. So that's one area. Certainly the John Gruden lawsuit. Now that's not against Snyder. That's against Gruden has filed a lawsuit against the National Football League and against Roger Goodell personally. But that's now in the Nevada Supreme Court. Gruden is 2 for 2 in wins at the district court level and the appellate court level. The NFL is fighting aggressively to try to get that case to arbitration behind closed doors. Gruden and his attorneys are fighting for there to be discovery. If they do win at the Nevada Supreme Court, the Gruden legal team, there is a chance that those 650,000 emails that were amassed during the Beth Wilkinson investigation could become discoverable. And we know that Bruce Allen has told John Gruden that there's bad news in there for everybody across the NFL. So that's another shoe that could drop. That's part of the sort of Snyder legacy. But the final thing for him is, and you pointed it out earlier, yes, he's walking away with billions of dollars, and I know there's been a lot of commentary about that like, what kind of punishment is this? He's basically got $5 billion. 5 of those $1 billion Powerball jackpots is what Snyder is going to get. But this is a team that he loved since he was a boy. This was his entire identity. When he took over the team, he said it was a dream come true. You go back and you look at that video, and look, nobody's going to feel sorry for Dan Snyder, and I'm not either. But this is somebody who was so hopeful that he was going to be able to turn around the team that he loved. And he now walks away, arguably, and I think it's true, as the worst owner in NFL history. And that's what he's done to himself, and that's something he's going to have to live with. And he's done it to himself. All of these things are self-inflicted wounds. And so what the future is for him, I don't know. He's still a relatively young man. He's 58 years old, and we'll see what happens. But he certainly still has potentially legal jeopardy facing him with the investigation going on in Virginia, and for all we know, other places. And I know there's been some commentary, and I agree with it, that the Mary Jo White report is potentially a blueprint for an aggressive prosecutor or a prosecutor inclined to look to see whether there have been crimes committed while Snyder was owner of the Commanders.
If those 650,000 emails become discoverable, you, sir, are going to be a very busy man. You and Seth are going to see so many emails, doing so much. I don't even know how you try to sort through it. That's why you have all the awards you've won, and I host a radio show. But good luck with that if that happens. More with Don Van Natta next here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too. Don't forget youtube.com/at the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And Don Van Natta from ESPN, their senior investigative reporters, with us for one more segment here. And Don, let's talk about the team now and how we all move forward. One of the other things that is in the Mary Jo White report that I found interesting is the team at times issued statements pushing back very hard on the financial impropriety. And the Mary Jo White report says that they have told the Eastern District of Virginia, we probably shouldn't have gone that hard on some of those statements. They also did not fully cooperate with everything that Mary Jo White asked for because of the intense nature of the amount of work it would have taken to do so. And they just figured they had better things to do with their time. This guy is on the way out. It's not the people that are here anymore. You know, I can imagine someone like Jason Wright being like, my employees have other things to do. I'm trying to move forward. Leave me alone. And on a human level, I get that, but that's not really how investigations work. So my question for you is the team, whether with the Eastern District of Virginia or with the NFL, and any potential peril to be fined, to be, I don't know what other kind of punishments they would have. I don't think they would do any kind of sporting punishment in terms of draft picks or anything like that. But is the team in the clear here with Josh Harris moving forward?
I think so when it comes to the National Football League. The wild card is any outside investigations, obviously, particularly if, and I believe there's a grand jury that's been impaneled on this in the Eastern District of Virginia. That's the question mark. If, in fact, those prosecutors do subpoena, if they haven't already done so, I believe they've done some of this. I know subpoenas have gone out, for instance, for information from the former limited partners. But if they were to ask for all of the Jason Friedman documents, if they haven't already done so, and it's a request that goes to the Commanders now as Josh Harris and his fellow partners are in charge, I mean, I'm assuming that they're going to cooperate, that whatever information that they still have, that they're going to pass on, which also may not be great for Snyder. But to your point, Craig, about the way Snyder dealt with Mary Jo White, and there was a stonewalling going on of Mary Jo White as well. Clearly, if you read the report carefully, and he only sat for a 1-hour interview with her. Back at the end of June, couldn't recall. He said, "I can't recall to most of the questions," and sort of punted and stonewalled. I mean, I can understand why his lawyers gave him that advice, because he's potentially in legal peril with this ongoing criminal investigation. But I don't think that there is going to be anything, and I could be wrong, but my sense is that the National Football League they want to close the book on Snyder just as much as the fan base in Washington wants to, and I don't think there's going to be any kind of sanctions or anything like that. I think that Josh Harris and his group is getting a complete clean start. I was hearing yesterday from somebody close to the group that they're going to consider changing the name. I put that out on Twitter. I mentioned it to Rich Eisen as well. I don't think they're going to do it until the off season after this upcoming season to consider it, but that's something that's being seriously considered. I know Magic Johnson confirmed it today to NBC that they're going to look at that. I mean, they don't want any stain from the Dan Snyder era on the team, and Dan Snyder chose the Commanders name. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a new name of the team next offseason.
Yeah, that was surprising because folks that are remaining in high positions who obviously have had whatever level of contact they're allowed, which in fairness to them is not very much, with ownership or with the incoming ownership, had said there's no way we're changing it again. Just like, I know the fans want it, but this is what it is. Am I correct that there's some kind of statute that the NFL has, like 5 years until they can change it again? And if so, would they waive it considering the special circumstances here?
There is. There's a rule that you can't change the name more than once in a 5-year period. Now, that rule was bent when it came to the Washington football team. Once the Redskins name was changed to Washington football team and then to the Commanders, that happened actually within the 5-year window. But my information is, if in fact Josh Harris does decide to change the name, and look, maybe it wouldn't be next year, maybe it'll be in 2 or 3 years. But whenever he wants to do it, I would be very, very surprised if the NFL stands in the way of a name change.
All right, last 2 questions for Don Van Natta of ESPN here on the way out. First is about the man you just mentioned. What are your first impressions of Josh Harris, getting to see him at the press conference yesterday, getting to I don't know if you've talked to him at all in the course of your reporting over the years on any story, nevertheless this one. But what were your impressions? I will say for me, Don, I was struck by the joy he had, and the kind of human, forget the billionaire facade. Like, he was just a guy who was really happy to have bought this football team that means a lot to him, to be a member of that ownership group, and a member of the membership, right? To be an NFL owner. That really struck me. It felt very human. But for you, what's your first impressions of Harris?
I had a similar impression. I've not interviewed him. I've never spoken with him. I know people close to him. I know people around him, but I've never interviewed him. That was my impression, too. It actually reminded me of the glee and the joy that Dan Snyder had, as I said, back in May of 1999, at the age of 34, when Snyder bought the team that he rooted for as a kid. Josh Harris is a local guy. He's a Maryland guy. There's a lot of joy just in that. And look, being a member of the membership, this is a big price he paid. $6 billion is a lot of money. And the reason why it's so high is because of the potential of what he can do and turn things around. That's what he's done. He's done that in his life, as an investor. So he has a history doing that. And yeah, I think he made a very, very good, very strong first impression because of that joy. You could see just how happy he is and how pleased he is. And but he has his work cut out for him. But as I've been saying, I mean, he's probably going to be given the longest honeymoon in the history of Washington, D.C., right? I mean, I think we're going to look at least 2 years, I would guess. I mean, you know better. You know the fan base better than me. But I would think that at least 2 years or even 3 years, there's going to be a lot of patience. And he's going to do the opposite of all the things Snyder did wrong. I mean, that's the playbook. Don't do any of these things. Try to build up a culture of respect and class and leadership, where every single member of the team, every employee is valued. Their worth is valued. All the things that we did not see happen under Snyder. Clearly, Josh Harris is that's the challenge, and if he can just do that's going to be obviously a great first step for the franchise.
I mean, obviously, we were thrilled that he called our radio stations and bought everyone at our events a beer. That is good for us. But I also think it showed an in-touchness that Snyder never did. Never, ever, ever, never, not one single time did Snyder show that he was in touch with the fan base. And I think that is Harris's at least if that is truly who he is, his biggest strength is to be smart and responsive. And whether that means, hey, they have a good year on the field and let's keep building with Sam Howell, and Ron Rivera gets to guide that from the head coach or an executive suite with Eric Bieniemy in whatever position he's in, great. If they have a bad year and moving on from Ron Rivera is what the fan base wants, doing that, like, I think, getting to, what the fan base wants and how long the honeymoon will be, if he's responsive, then he'll have that. If it feels like they're being ignored, then that runway gets shorter.
That's the key. I agree. I think that if Josh Harris were to literally say to the fans, tell us what you want, almost put out a sort of box, like a metaphorical box, an ideas box of this is what we want. I think there'll be a lot of votes for a rebranding and a new name. But beyond that, what do you want this franchise to be? This is your team. Just that message alone, if he does that, will go an incredibly long way. Because as you say, Dan Snyder never did that. Dan Snyder knew best. Dan Snyder was a bully. And he was, and he bullied everybody, and he felt he was the smartest guy in the room. If Josh Harris shows some humility and really some respect and understanding that he's got to now win back a lot of fans that were disenfranchised by Snyder and his sort of reign of terror for so long, that's going to buy him a lot of goodwill, and you'll see the upsurge in ticket sales and enthusiasm come September.
No doubt. All right, last question for you, Don. This was a monumental piece of reporting. You've done a lot of major things in your career. I don't know if you've thought even remotely about where this ranks, but there's no doubt it's got to be one of the most consequential I don't say pieces because it was a series that you do. This long investigation that has multiple parts, multiple pieces. It's as multifaceted of a sports story as I can remember reading, which was bizarre being in the middle of it because it feels like it's swirling around you. And I can't imagine how you felt being the one who knew that it was coming before all of us. But when you see your reporting ultimately lead to the sale of an NFL franchise, you said earlier, like, we just did our jobs, and I know you feel that strongly. You don't start an investigation with a specific outcome like that in mind. Your specified outcome is the truth. But when it lands like this, and you see the accountability in this form, how do you reflect on it personally?
Well, I wanted to be a reporter since I was a little kid. It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do is to be a journalist. And when journalism does its job and shines a light on places where powerful people are trying to keep that light from being shown, that's very, very gratifying. I've been a reporter now 35 years. I was at the New York Times for 16. Where it ranks, I don't know. But again, Craig, and this is not some false humility, I really mean this, we were just doing our jobs. And the true heroes are the women and the former employees, the 40 people who Lisa Banks represents, Melanie and Megan and all of them who at great personal made great personal sacrifices in coming forward and making allegations, and private investigators were put on some of these people, and they were portrayed as liars, and all sorts of the most horrible, despicable behavior was they were subjected to, and they're the heroes. They're the reason why Snyder was forced to sell the team. As journalists, I mean, we're only as good as our sources, and I am lucky, and so is Seth, that I've been doing this now for ESPN since 2012, and we've developed a really strong network of sources all around, not just the NFL, but around sports, but particularly around the NFL. And they were invaluable in helping us land the stories that we landed. But again, if it were not for that first step that was taken back in 2020 by these incredibly courageous people at great personal peril, we wouldn't be here today.
I won't lecture the audience on what it takes to do the kind of work that you do, but I call it capital J journalism. I get to do opinion journalism and talk for 3 hours a day to a microphone, and as someone who at least has done a little bit of capital J journalism in his day, very, very small amount, and seeing what it takes to do the very small amount I did, I have so much admiration for the way you do it, for what Seth does, and for the work you guys do, the way you go about it, the professionalism you show. It's really remarkable as someone who's in the field, and I very much appreciate on a personal level your willingness to come on this show and talk about it at length many, many times over the course of the last couple of years. So thank you very much.
Craig, it's my pleasure. I'm a great admirer of you. I've told you that offline. I think you do a terrific job, and to get the truth out there too. So, I see us as partners in arms, basically. And so anytime you need me, call on me. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And if you keep investigating people who are interesting to the audience, you bet I'll be calling. Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Craig.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@the-team980. Stream's been buzzing all day. C-Man comment, go ding dong. I guess that's because the Wicked Witch is dead. And actually, Anthony, before we get back to the sound, not only from Josh Harris today, but from Mitchell Rales and Magic Johnson, who had a lot of really interesting things to say, both tremendously compelling speakers at this press conference today. I'd love to go back real quick to yesterday, to the event that we held, the one that made the front page of the Washington Post, the one that, was kind of a big deal, to say the absolute least. Burgundy and Sold was a smashing success. Josh Harris bought everybody beers. That was sweet. I mean, well over 1,000 people. It might have been thousands of people that came. It's certainly thousands that came throughout the course of the day. I don't know what it ultimately peaked at because I just don't know how many people the bullpen holds. But we found out because that's the thing. Is like for all the people that were with us at ground level, so to speak, there was another group of people that was up on top. I just remember that right now, is that there's a whole other level up top there. And it was crazy. I obviously was there through my show. I got to introduce Melanie and Tiffany on the stage, who were greeted with the hero's welcome that they deserve. So that was cool. And then I bounced out because I was exhausted and I had been out in the heat for a long, long time, and it was time for me to go home. How late did you wind up staying last night?
I stayed until about 8:30, 8:40, somewhere around there. So I was only there for about an hour and a half. I ran over after the show.
Hey, you got there quick.
Yeah, Craig, when I tell you I was sprinting, because when I walked out of the building, it was probably 7:10, because they were supposed to perform the Commander song at 7:30. So I was like, all right, give myself some time to take my bag to my car and then rush over. So I get to my car, and I hear, "Those haters can't stand us." That's the first thing I heard. Oh, they started. So I threw my bag in my car. I changed my shoes real quick. And, Craig, when I tell you I got into a full sprint, I was in a full sprint. And
Who was saying, the fastest man alive?
I went through the entrance, and I came through just singing, "Those haters can't stand," because they got back to the chorus. I'm like, oh, man. So, yeah, that's how I started. And then I stayed about an hour and a half, watched Doc and Linnell and Fred Smoot, hype all the fans up.
They let Linnell on stage?
I went on stage for a little bit, but not really.
Linnell was on stage?
No. They were under the tent. When I tell you they had a mosh pit over there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was crazy. Somebody had accidentally bumped into the little tent, and it almost collapsed, but somebody caught it. So yeah, it was a lot going on, a lot of energy from the fans, but overall, great event.
Yeah, I mean, just remarkable. I mean, as I said yesterday in the show, these things are about community and people coming together, and boy, did people come together yesterday. They took it seriously, and that was the best. And the joy was serious. The fun was serious. Who was the last junkie standing? Because I was thinking about that. Cakes had himself a good time. He had a couple of adult sodas. And then they had a show this morning at 6 a.m. And those guys drive in from not close. So I don't know what time their alarms go off, but it's early. I also, by the way, I don't know if I even told you this. Your boy was on national TV at 6:20 this morning.
For real?
Yeah. I got hit up last night during the show by a producer from News Now. And so I was sitting in this chair at this microphone at 6:20 a.m. this morning. Actually, at 6:05 for my tech check. And then I was on. And we did 3.5 minutes on the Commanders and the investigations and the whole deal. So yeah, I've been up for a hot second. I was also up very early. I could have consumed the entire Junkies radio program this morning, in terms of awakeness. But who was the last junkie there before they were like, I got to go home because I got a radio show to do?
So the thing is, I saw them all take one It was 4 people. It was B. Mitch.
Well, they did the
Jeff
shot
Walker.
ski. I was still there for that.
Yeah, so they took the shot, and that was the last I saw of them because they were all near the stage. But everybody left after everyone took the shot, like B. Mitch, the Junkies. Like after that, I walked
Sheehan
away
was
for
holding
5
court
minutes.
for a while.
Yeah.
Sheehan did the post up and let people come to him bit.
Sheehan was there after I left. I left before Sheehan.
Man of the people, Kevin Sheehan.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know who was the last person standing, but I know a lot of people left probably around like 7:30 or so. Because
I was late. It had to be later than that because I think we didn't leave till at least 7:30. I mean, the show ended at 7, so.
Oh, I don't know then. I don't know. Maybe my time is off.
Yeah.
But
I don't
super sidebar.
Super sidebar.
When you got up this morning, before your TV hit, did you brush your teeth?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I was out of bed and making sure things were.
I always make
brushed
fun
them
of my
before.
girlfriend for not brushing her teeth when she first gets up.
I brushed them last night, and then I was like, let me make sure there's no crusties in my eyes.
Oh yeah, that's important.
I didn't at least before the tech check. I don't know. It's so long ago. I might have actually brushed them like in between the tech. I was like, how long do I have? And then I like went and washed my face and like made my hair look better. Okay. And I might have brushed my teeth in there, but there's honest to God no telling.
That was random, I know.
Because it was very early in the morning. Very early in the morning. Is that like a first thing you do in the morning? Wake up, brush your teeth, kind of bit.
It's one of the first things I do. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Unless I'm sleeping in, where I just don't get out of bed, that's probably the only time I don't.
I see. All right. I learned something new about Anthony today.
You learn something new every day.
And the funny thing is, it's one of those things. There's some people that are like, yeah, no, I brush my teeth at night and I'm good, and my dentist says I'm good. And there's another group of people who think that group of people, which I admittedly belong to more often than brushing in the morning, that are like, how can you not brush first thing in the morning? You all are gross.
Yeah.
And you're in that group.
I am.
That's what we just learned today.
Yep.
You know what else we learned today? Having Magic Johnson on your football team is a good time. You'll hear from Magic coming up at 6:15, but you'll hear from the majority owner, Josh Harris, next on The Hoffman Show.
Hey, I'm Craig Hoffman.
And I'm Logan Paulson.
Final hour of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. You'll hear from the Commanders ownership group over the next half hour before we get you set for the biggest event in sports tonight, the U.S. Women's National Team's debut in the 2023 World Cup against Vietnam, who's making their debut in any Women's World Cup. Andre Carlisle, our resident expert, at least the guy I invite over all the time to be our expert. He's going to join us coming up at 6:30. So right now, though, as we take a look back at some of the most important things that Josh Harris said today, of course, Harris introduced as the new managing partner of the Commanders. And, you know, there's kind of been this igniting of the name discussion. And I feel like in some way it started with Kevin. Like, credit where it's due. Obviously, a lot of fans are, you know, it's a little bit chicken and egg. Anytime we in the media say something and then fans are saying something, like we're fans starting to say it, then we talked about it. It's impossible to nail down a starting point. It became very clear over the past couple of weeks as Sheehan talked about it a lot. And it's something that he and a lot of other people care about is examining the name and the brand. And so when he talks about the name Commanders, you know, obviously Josh Harris saying, like, you know, we're the Commanders for now, but are you the Commanders long term? Is this something that you will look at? After Don Van Natta reported that they were definitely looking at it, and he almost would expect them to change it, even as soon as this season. Magic Johnson certainly did not shy away from it on the Today Show this morning. So when asked directly, here's what Josh Harris said. Cut 10, Anthony. Cut 10 on the name Commanders.
Yeah, so it's not about how I feel. It's about how the city feels about all this stuff. And like I said, our priorities are, we got to get ready for a football season. We got to improve the existing fan experience. Then we got to get at it in the community and get out there. We're going to look at everything and see where we are. But those are our three priorities right now.
So that's not a no, which I think is important. Because I do think that if there was a no, he could shut it down. Because, Commanders Twitter right now, crazy. There's, like, a group of people that's kind of where Josh Harris is. It's like, we'll see. There's a group of people that are hell-bent on changing the name. And there's a group of people that are mad at the group of people who are hell-bent on changing the name. And that group of people could have, and frankly, all groups could have been, shut up about this by just saying, no, we're not changing the name. But that's not what he's committing to, and he doesn't want to have to backtrack. He doesn't want to say, I will never do anything, because what does history teach us? Well, if you're a Commanders owner and you say you'll never do something, you will change the name and sell the team. Bye, Dan. But if he wanted to shut it down, he could have shut it down. But he's not committing to it, but he's leaving the door open. And I think that tells us a lot. I think what it means is he's planning on investigating that thoroughly after the season. And I do think that it's worth mentioning, if you missed our interview with Don Van Natta just a little bit ago, Don, who kind of really brought this to the surface yesterday in some reporting, something he mentioned on Rich Eisen's show and tweeted about as well. When I asked him on our show about the NFL's 5-year rule where you can't change the name for 5 years, he said the NFL, considering the circumstances here, would have no problem bending that. He can't see a circumstance where they would hold to that. They would just say, hey, this is a special circumstance. Capiche? They don't have a massive problem right now of teams changing names all the time. So that guardrail is one that we can hop over safely and not worry about setting a precedent moving forward. Obviously, not just the name that people want to change, and that's a mixed bag. Everyone wants to change the culture. Rivera's helped to start doing it on the football side. Jason Wright has been hard at work doing that on the business side, but ultimately it only works if it's from the top down. And there's still been a lot of poison in that organization because of the types of things that Dan Snyder asked people to do, from the PR staff having to put out these statements that are, some of which have now gotten them in legal trouble, and other, whatever asinine things that Dan wants or doesn't want done. So how do you change the culture moving forward? Here's Josh Harris on that.
Yeah, look, a lot of stuff happened, right, that was unfortunate. We're focused on changing the culture. I think a lot of that's hopefully been done. I mean, that's what we think, but we got to get in there. And obviously, it's about creating a management team where everyone doesn't look the same. And it's about zero tolerance on, ethically challenged behaviors. Like when you own a sports team in a city, everyone looks at what you do. It's the old adage that my mom and dad used to say, which is like, behave as if whatever you do is going to be written about on the front page of the Washington Post. And here I am.
You meant the Athletic.
So,
that's okay.
And when you own a team, everyone who works at the team, whether you like it or not, everyone that works at the team, all of my partners, and everyone who's involved with the team, right? They're a reflection on you. And so ultimately, it's on us. The reason some of this stuff takes a long time is it's one person at a time, and it's all about culture. And so we're going to be very intentional about culture, and it's what we've done in the past.
I love that quote so much, and also very, very funny that David Aldridge, who asked the question, which is why David had the microphone. It's like, you mean The Athletic, of course, his employer. But, I mean, the saying of, pretend like everything you're going to do is going to be on the front page of the Washington Post. Like, when you are Josh Harris and an employee of the Commanders, depending on what the behavior is, that could be true. So you should act like it because it's true. And in the middle there, Harris makes, again, I don't know whether it's conscious or subconscious. He's smart enough to know what he's doing. I don't know. I wouldn't read this as Harris takes shots at Snyder. It's Harris says good things, and that inherently reflects poorly on Snyder because there's a contrast on what Snyder did, right? But he says when people do stuff in the organization, that is a reflection on you. And in this case, on me as the owner. And think about how different that is. Because Dan Snyder, after a toxic workplace that sustained the entire 24 years of his ownership, that only got worse at certain points, but certainly predated Bruce Allen, maybe it apexed under Bruce Allen, but many of the accusations brought up to Congress and the other investigations far predate Bruce, who, again, no saint, but is not solely responsible for everything that happened in D.C. and in, or I should say in Ashburn, right? And Josh Harris but what did Dan do, right? Dan said, I blame Bruce. Bruce's fault. Brucey Bruce, Bruce. Brucey Bruce, Bruce. And Harris is like, whatever happens is on me. If one of my executives does something bad, that's a reflection on me. And whether it's I allowed that to happen or just it's my fault for hiring that person, whatever rationale you want to throw behind why that is true, it's all true. The buck stops at Josh Harris. He is the managing partner. He is not the majority owner, but the biggest shareholder. He owns 30-something%. To be a majority owner, you technically have to own, a majority over 50. But he's the guy in charge. And so to hear that is beyond refreshing. A little bit more from Harris before you hear from Magic Johnson and Mitchell Rales next. On the process moving forward, it's day one of work for Josh Harris. What's he doing?
Yeah, look, we're just getting here. I mean, obviously, we've witnessed as fans, right, from the outside, what Coach Rivera and his staff and the front office and the team has done over the last few years, and it's improving. This is a big season, and we look forward to learning and watching and seeing what happens. And I'm very excited to be spending time with Coach Rivera and his staff and the players and understanding what's going on, and I'm very supportive right now of what they're doing.
I really appreciate that answer from Harris, too, because I do think some people would be like, you got to fire Ron. How come you didn't tell him that he's on the hot seat? In order to properly evaluate Ron Rivera, you have to let him coach this season. There is no, I guess technically because of how much power and influence Bieniemy already has, if you wanted to fire Rivera and put Bieniemy in charge as head coach, there's not that much that would change outside of the obvious in-game responsibilities. But remember, this is EB's first time calling plays in the NFL. You want to give him that plus all the head coach stuff? No, that's a terrible idea. That's setting him up to fail, considering he hasn't had the offseason to prepare for it. I'm not saying that he's not ready to be an offensive or not ready to be head coach. It's just he would have had a chance to hire his staff and all that kind of stuff. If you want to give the guy a chance to be a head coach, you should do it in the offseason when he has a chance to be a head coach, not assume head coaching responsibilities with someone else's staff. So, capiche on that. But with Rivera, the only way to really find out if he can be your head coach as the owner is to do your part as the owner, let him do his part as the coach, and see the results at the end. And so I appreciate that he's like, hey, I'm supportive of what they're doing right now. They put a lot of thought in these things. He's asked for stuff. I'm going to give it to him, and then off you go. Last thing, Sam Fortier asked this question from the Post, and I thought it was a good one. Josh Harris talked about this a little bit yesterday, but more expansive today on how he manages his time now. Being a sports owner is a job. Although, you're the one who's signing all the checks, not receiving them, although you do receive some pretty hefty checks as part of the gig. That's why so many rich folks want to own sports teams. But there is actual work to be done. It's not just signing checks. So how does he do it for the Devils, the Sixers, and the Commanders? And what kind of priority will his newest team be? Here was Harris answering that.
Yeah, look, when I did this, it was personally not the best time, right? I had a busy life. I have a business. I have sports teams. But when I took on, when the availability of the Commanders occurred, we all came together. All these accomplished people. I mean, Mitch runs, Matt, one of the biggest companies in the world. Mark has a lot of activities. Magic, runs Magic Johnson Enterprises and has an enormous amount going on. David Blitzer has got his day job at Blackstone, and if you knew the other partners, a lot of which who are here, they would also have super busy lives. But all of us said, look, we're from Washington. We grew up with the then Redskins. We know how much this team meant to this city, which is a divided city in a lot of ways. Let's face it, politics are tough. And the city is tough, and so this is a responsibility that we need to take and put in front. And so we all are going to make time for it. And I appreciate that as the managing partner, as the owner, I'm going to be present. Like this, you can't mail it in. And I'm really excited to be back in D.C. To be back. I think one of my best friends from high school is my cousins are there. I got my mom who lives at Friendship Heights, and so I look forward to re-engaging with the city. And I'll be around. Thank you, guys. Let's go. Let's go.
There was also that palpable excitement of the let's go. We need to get a Josh Harris let's go on the board. We got to cut that and have that ready, because it wasn't just there. I mean, he said it yesterday at the press conference with Goodell. I saw him, slapping hands in the crowd today at the pep rally, and he's, let's go. This is a guy who very clearly to me was an athlete and played sports and likes sports. I don't think. Let me ask. This is admittedly on the borderline of mean and picking on Dan Snyder, but considering all the things Dan Snyder did, I'm all right with it. Anthony, in your head, if you took an NFL football and just either casually toss or even underhand toss it at Dan Snyder, in your head, what is his reaction?
He'll probably move out the way. Oh.
Right. If you toss a football at Josh Harris, what's his reaction?
Oh, he gonna catch that, Jane. He might spike it. He might throw it back.
And I'm not saying that is ultimately the sign of a great leader. There are many great leaders who could not catch a football. But from the sheer just energy he is bringing, Josh Harris is a guy that catch a football. Dan Snyder's a guy that would jump out of the way. You and I are on the same page there. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. What does Magic Johnson do?
Magic, he's going to catch it. He's going to spin it. He might throw it behind a back pass. I think he's going to get creative with it.
Yeah, I think that's correct. What does Magic Johnson say? Well, you get to hear him next. It is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Real Things, Real People said into microphones later. It will include a tremendous story from Magic Johnson, a full circle moment. We will get to that a little bit later, but right now, some more from Magic. Of course, the new minority owner of the Washington Commanders. First of all, how crazy is that? How nuts is it that we are talking about Magic Johnson? Magic Johnson. For 24 years, you had Dan Snyder and like Dan Snyder's sister, and then you had, I guess for a while you did have, Fred Smith and the FedEx, founder of FedEx, which like in its own way, I guess is fine. But it ain't Magic Johnson, and Magic is going to be involved. Here's Magic's message to the fans today on what he is planning on bringing to this organization.
God is so good. I'm so blessed today. Man, give him all the honor and glory to be this incredible African-American man, this black man standing here, to be a part of this incredible franchise.
This is a long bite.
Josh and I talked. The first thing I said was, do you want to win? And he said, yes.
Let's pause it right there, Anthony, because Magic doesn't, like, if you watched any number of documentaries or feature type pieces on Magic Johnson, you know how serious of a competitor he is. I mean, if you know his resume, you know how serious of a competitor he is. But there's two people almost within Magic Johnson. There's Magic, the effervescent personality, and there's Irvin. And Irvin is intense, and Irvin is competitive. Irvin is the businessman. And Magic and Irvin have had to figure out how to coexist over the years, and Irvin's had to do some work on Irvin over the years. If you watch the Apple TV documentary on Magic, which is just phenomenal, highly, highly recommend, especially for if you're newly interested in Magic Johnson for, I don't know, some random reason, would highly recommend checking that out on Apple TV. It was a 4-part doc that came out last summer, and he talks about how just maniacally competitive he is. And every little thing he's got to win. And so there is a reason people like that, who also have the intelligence and savvy of Magic Johnson and Irvin Johnson, if you will, win. Like, the Dodgers win. And it's not just because they pay people. It's because they do business a certain way. Magic has turned, the Starbucks and the movie theaters into a billion-dollar empire in Magic Johnson Enterprises that simultaneously makes tremendous impacts in communities across this country in some of the most underserved places, and also makes a boatload of money. He does both. He does the good. He makes the money. He was, in 12 years, in the NBA Finals 9 times, won 5 of them. Like, this dude is competitive, and when he competes, he wins. So it was not at all surprising to hear him say, the first thing I asked Josh Harris was, do you want to win? Because if Josh Harris says, I just think someone needs to buy this franchise, I want to win, but like we have other things, then Magic is like, I'm out. Because, yes, all that is true. Someone else did need to run the franchise. Someone needed to save it from Snyder. It's going to make a lot of money, but you can do both. You can make the money and win and do good in the community. And Anthony, as we'll pick up, not the same bite, but the community bite from Magic a little bit later in his brief remarks today. You can win, you can make money, and you can do good in the community. And that is where Magic certainly will have his impact. He's already had an impact. For those that don't know, like he's opened a lot of Starbucks, for instance, here. He's got some other businesses. He was a part of the Washington Hilton here, apparently. I learned that today as he spoke. But he's ingratiated in this community in some ways, and that is going to grow based off of this new role he has with the Commanders.
We want to change everything that has happened to this franchise. We see the winners in the front row. Not only did they win Super Bowls, they also made the community great. And we want to invite the community to be a part of what we're building here. That's going to be a part of my role, is to get out into the community and help them understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, and also we want to give back. We want to make an impact on this great community that we're doing business in.
And then there's Mitchell Rales, who does not speak publicly often, but was compelling today, to say the least. I don't know how much time, Anthony, is this his entire message, the big bite that you got written down in the rundown? If so, let's just play a part of it, because we only have so much time left in the segment. But I would certainly say anybody that has the time to go back and watch. The Commanders posted or live streamed it on Twitter, so you can go there. I'm sure they posted it on YouTube now as well. But here's Mitchell Rales talking to the fans, the second biggest shareholder now in the Washington Commanders.
This is incredibly humbling.
Minute 45.
I mean, I wish my parents were here to see this day. They moved me to the Washington area when I was 10 years old, and fortunately I gave up the Steelers for the then Redskins. I got on the bus at Friendship Heights with my 3 brothers, and we made our way down to RFK, and we never missed a game. So to see the legends standing here in front of me now, the people that I aspired to be like as I was growing up, is just unbelievable.
Yeah,
but
that's,
what's
we'll
really
stop it there,
unbelievable-
Anthony. That like humbling appreciation was something that every single person that was up there today talked about. And it wasn't just the legends or just their families. It was also an appreciation for John Allen and Terry McLaurin, who I think it's worth noting were there today. And it's worth noting because of exactly what Brian Mitchell and Doc Walker said on this show yesterday, as two guys who were a fabric of the team for a long time. You need guys who, and I'm gonna use this term a lot. I kind of haphazardly started using it yesterday, but I'm going to start using it more intentionally. The fabric of the team. That is what a guy like Doc was, a guy like B. Mitch was, the people you could rely on, no matter how good they were as players. John Allen and Terry McLaurin are fabric players. They just also happen to be great. And to see them there and to see them already embraced by this group and to know that this is the kind of person you're going to build around, I think is incredibly encouraging moving forward. All right, when we get back, as exciting as this is, there is the biggest event on the world stage, and the U.S.'s role in it begins tonight. The World Cup, we talk about it with Andre Carlisle next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
You can listen to the Team 980 on your smart.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. My pleasure now to welcome to the show my guy Andre Carlisle, who of course covers women's football globally for how many podcasts are we doing now? Three at least.
I think I've narrowed it down to 3.
So we're gonna talk to Andre about U.S. Women's National Team. They face Vietnam tonight. Andre, and of course this is their first tournament. We've seen some great games so far already, including wins by the two host countries. Incredibly emotional crowd, 75,000. The only reason they were both not 80,000 is because the stadium's only held 75. But when you look at this U.S. team tonight, first of all, let's just put this out there. What kind of scoreline are we expecting tonight? Because while there's a lot of talk about the world catching up and how close this could be, and that the U.S. I think they're probably still the betting favorites, but there's a lot of experts not picking them. This is expected to be, I would say, a more traditional dominant U.S. win against Vietnam. Yes.
I would hope so. If they struggle against Vietnam, we got really big problems, and that's no disrespect to Vietnam. They actually played very, very well against Germany in a warm-up match. They could have beaten Germany or at least drew with them, and the final score ended up being 2-1. But Vietnam had a lot of chances. Big caveats were Germany were kind of playing a bit of their B team, and their superstar defensive midfielder Lena Oberdorf went off at halftime, and that's where Vietnam in the second half really started to counter quite well. Then they lost to New Zealand by conceding 27 shots. They lost 2-0, and they lost 9-0 to Spain. So I would expect a lot of goals, probably not the 13-0 we saw against Taiwan in 2019, but quite a few.
So for the U.S. tonight, obviously we should see a number of the local names in the starting lineup. But just how many is the question, and that also gets to, I think, the larger question at bay, which is what is the health status of some of the biggest names on this roster? Where's Rose Lavelle right now? Where's Julie Ertz right now? And I feel like I'm missing at least one more in terms of minutes and players that really haven't played a lot leading into this World Cup. Megan Rapinoe hasn't played a lot leading into this World Cup. So what's the injury status there, and who do you expect to be in the lineup and out of the lineup tonight?
Yeah, so Vlatko Andonovski announcer had a little presser this morning, I guess morning, whatever it is in New Zealand when he did it there in the future. So he noted that Julie Ertz is 100% fit. That's interesting. We'll see how ready she is for minutes. He said the same thing about Rose Lavelle and Megan Rapinoe. They're a little bit behind schedule, not behind schedule, but behind where Julie Ertz is, but they are healthy enough to dress and may get minutes, but they're not 90 minutes fit, so we don't know if they're going to start against competition like Vietnam. I would probably expect them to be on the bench, which means we might see Ashley Sanchez. The big question for me is the 6. If Julie Ertz is 100% fit, then do we get Julie Ertz or do we get Andy Sullivan? I think this is going to be a very interesting call.
Yeah, of course, Andy Sullivan, the captain. I guess technically she doesn't wear the armband every game anymore, but one of the co-captains of the Washington Spirit here in DC born bred, which is also to me something that's very cool and fun about the World Cup. With the U.S. rosters, you kind of get to, not just where do they play for the club team, but like who are these women, where are they from, like what is their story, which is always the part of any national team. But with Julie and Andy and that defensive midfield, that 6 position. Like I think I can make an argument, even as someone who believes that Andy deserves to be the main minutes getter there, based off of everything the last couple of years, that I'd play Julie tonight because it is a bit of an easier game. Get her some minutes, get her back out there. She hasn't had a lot of time on the field. How do you think Vlatko is thinking about that? Or is this a World Cup? You just don't mess around, even if it is Vietnam, you expect to beat by a pretty handy amount.
That is a fascinating question, and I think what you and I would do may not be what Vlatko chooses to do. He's been a little unpredictable with some of these things, and when he calls on certain players and when he doesn't. For me, this match looks pretty set up to have Andy. I think Vietnam are going to be in a low block. I think you want Andy's passing range back there. I think you want her cerebral mentality at the number 6. I don't know if you need a complete destroyer back there because, to be frank, there probably won't be a whole lot to destroy. There may be a few counterattacks that look a little dangerous, but I don't necessarily know if you need Julie Ertz. To get her some minutes, though, that is a good point. Maybe you do get her out there to get fit, give her a start. It's been a while, but we'll see. I think you could make a case for either or. I prefer Andy just because of the passing ability, but I'm a guy who talks on podcasts. I don't coach the team.
We have talked on podcasts and radio shows, and in case you missed it, you want something to kind of catch up on this weekend, you watch the game. Wait, I need to know more. Andre, you should listen to all of Andre's podcasts. Andre Carlisle is our guest. Bass United. What other pods are you doing from over there? Which of the pods are active and going on U.S. national team adjacent stuff?
Diaspora United is the main one. I also do a Hey Spirits one that covers the Washington Spirit. There is a Fran Kirby's Fight Club that deals with Chelsea, but that one's kind of dormant at the moment during the World Cup, even though Chelsea can't stop signing players, which
different story. But Diaspora United for Andre's kind of live coverage content. But he will be going to New Zealand here shortly. But we did a big preview. That's a podcast version. Scroll back in the Hoffman show feed and check that out. But we talked on that show, and I know you talked about it yours about the roster construction here, how that also plays a decision at the defensive midfield spot. Not really having a backup central defender or that person being Emily Sonnet, who's also backup outside backs. Does that you think play a role in the decision to play Ertz or not as a starter, knowing she's kind of your emergency center back if Alana Kirk were to sub?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the way he named this squad and set this squad up, if you have any sort of injury kind of along the back line, things get quite dicey quite quickly, especially in central defense. So we'll see. I think even if Julie Ertz has to play substantial minutes at center back, that would probably also be a problem. She hasn't really played that role consistency since I think 2017, and that was not with the national team necessarily. So it's been a minute for her playing that role, and I would be a little concerned with that. So I think keeping an eye on it, making sure that you are okay there. But I mean, the truth of the matter is he brought 2 natural center backs. That's all we got. So we're going to have to figure it out at some point, and hopefully, knock on all the wood that's nearby, we don't have any issues.
Yeah, Emily Sonnet obviously has played at a championship level there when Spirit won in 2021, but she's been playing defensive midfield. Ironically, he's been playing the 6 with OL Reign this season. Andre, I discovered a problem in the weirdest places that Black Girls going to have to encounter here, which is I was playing FIFA. And what you realize when you're playing FIFA and you're trying to figure out your starting lineup and then who you want on the bench is there's some really difficult decisions on who is up, who is active, where you're going to be thin, where you're not, because of this roster construction. When you think of what the not only the starting lineup is going to be, not just tonight against Vietnam, but in this tournament, who are some of the players that you think might be surprisingly unavailable as they are inactive, and also remind folks in the audience how the roster rules work for these World Cup games?
Yeah, so the roster rules is you get 23. You do have 3 alternates, but they're basically there if there's an injury and somebody can't go. So they're not necessarily with the team or doing anything. So you have to kind of figure it out. Of course, halfway around the world in New Zealand and Australia, it's going to be interesting. So yeah, the roster thing gets very interesting. And to me, it gets the most interesting in attack. I think the midfield is fairly set. He's either going to kind of go with Julie Ertz or Andy Sullivan, but you're also going to see primarily Lindsay Oran is going to be in that midfield when she's healthy. And then Roosevelt when she's healthy. If she's not healthy, we're going to see Ashley Sanchez, which is great. So, the midfield is pretty set. It's the attack where I think is going to be super interesting, especially when you kind of factor in the send-off game versus Wales. Wales, of course, were not at the World Cup, weren't a team that qualified, but that was an interesting performance where when Alex Morgan was the central striker, they looked a little flat. It wasn't really until he had the combination of Sophia Smith, Trinity Rodman, and Lynn Williams on the pitch together that they started to open up and get behind Wales' defense. And I think that's going to be key because all 3 of those players play a bit similarly. He doesn't necessarily have someone in those profile of players who likes to deliver service into the box, which Alex Morgan feasts off of. So for me, I would almost kind of look at it, depending on game plan or strategy. What are you going to do with Alex Morgan? Does she start some games? Does she sit on the bench for some others? And when she gets into the game, are you having Megan Rapinoe? Are you having a kind of dead ball delivery or service delivery, maybe like Savannah DeMello, who just has 1 cap, but she's excellent at serving the ball with accuracy into the box. So it's going to be interesting to see how he juggles this and if he figures out that he even needs to, because I think we'll keep seeing some weird attacking performances until he does.
I would say not necessarily push back, but I would highlight the fact that Trinity Rodman is actually excellent at serving into the box. she is someone who because she finishes so well, because she moves so well in space and makes defenders look silly and runs past them, pushes them over and makes them fall down and look like they don't belong in the field with her on a very regular basis in the most competitive league in the world. People forget she's also an incredible passer. And to me, like when you go to this starting lineup decision, he's got of do I start the 18-year-old Alyssa Thompson, who is electric and brings so much to the table? Do I start Lynn Williams, who is the same type of player, much more experienced, electric, phenomenal pace, knows how to do the work at a level that Alyssa Thompson has never experienced because she's 18 years old and Williams has played in an Olympics for it, and by the way, played very well. To me, the separator in that wing position opposite of Sophia Smith, who is locked down in the starting lineup because she's the best in the world, certainly the best in Indiana, but NWSL, perhaps the best in the world right now at it, is Trinity's passing ability. Are you with me on that? And do you think ultimately that's the direction Blacko will go?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely don't want to frame it as Trinity Rodman isn't a good, delivers service into the box. But to me, the way she's most effective is when she has a little bit more athleticism than maybe something like Lynn Williams or Sophia Smith could provide. She can hit a target forward, but I think you're wasting a little bit of her abilities, and especially in transition when you win the ball deep, of her being able to combine on the run with players who can kind of keep up with her and give her options while she's on the ball. Or just like we saw the goal against Wales, she's also very good at reading play because she made a parallel run on the opposite side of the box, which made a very easy pass for Sophia Smith to get that opening goal. So it's those kind of moments that I think are going to be important. And, it's more difficult to try to have that Alex Morgan there, and then you really only have Trinity, who's going to be serving the ball into the box. She can.
I was just looking at it as like, we know Alex is going to play. So who's the best pair with Alex as opposed to going? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of saw in the New Zealand game, I believe the friendlies earlier this year, was it Trinity Rodman had a hat trick of assists? I think she had them with her right and her left foot. So yeah, she's got great service delivery. It just depends on how they're able to use her and what they do. Blacko's been a little interesting in how he has deployed her, how he's utilized her skill set. I don't quite think he's gotten the full use of her yet because what we see week to week with her with the Washington Spirit is outrageous. And I think it's probably taken a little bit of time. So we'll see. But I do think that I'm hopeful. I know I'm probably not likely to see it, but I am hopeful that we get to see more of Rodman, Smith, and Williams, because I think that's just a front three that is impossible to cope with for really any defense.
No doubt about it. All right, U.S. Vietnam tonight, 9 p.m. Diaspora United. We'll have all of the reaction in the podcast space that you need. And then Andre's going to get on a plane to New Zealand. He'll land 7,400 hours in the future. And then the thing is, those of us still here, we have to figure out our schedules. And if we're going to get up for that 3 a.m. game, you got to figure out how you're going to get your body to not think it's 3 a.m. all the time. So, it's different strokes for different folks.
I am very much looking forward to being like local time with the World Cup instead of what's going on right now. Because it's been fun, but the sleep deprivation is real.
It is so real. All right, Andre Carlisle, everybody. When we get back, Magic Johnson told an incredible story today at the Commander's press conference of how it is truly a full circle moment for him, become a minority partner in this team. You'll hear the real things next on the Team 980.
This is DC's home for Maryland Terrapins basketball.
That was
the Team 980. Always live on the free Odyssey
app. I had to replug in my headphones, so
the Universal Circus is the summer experience that brings everyone together. This can't-miss experience includes the ultimate dirt bike demo under a brand new Big Top tent with new wider seats for comfort and bright lights on new acts from China and Eastern Europe.
Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Again tonight, 9 o'clock, U.S. Women's National Team. By the way, Anthony, rocking my Ashley Sanchez jersey. Got all fired up, ready to go. Also tonight, before that, 8 o'clock, you'll hear me again on this radio station because I'm joining BetQL tonight to talk about the Commanders sale with the guys on the night show, so the national show. Be on that tonight, which will be fun. And then it's the weekend. And then next week, we are in the week that training camp starts. So that's pretty cool. Anthony, what are you doing this weekend? Anything fun?
One of my high school friends, he got engaged in like May, I want to say.
Congratulations.
And thank you. He's finally having
him,
his engagement dinner back home. He currently lives in California, so.
He apparently lives in California?
No, he currently.
Currently. I thought you said apparently. I was like, that's a apparently. I didn't know.
Yeah, so he's coming back home, family and friends celebrating with us. We're going to go to some place called Fig and Olive.
I've heard of it. I've heard it's excellent. I have not been, but I've heard it's good.
Yeah. Quick question, Craig.
What's up?
When you hear semi-formal attire, what comes to mind?
Ooh, like a khaki or slacks and button down, but no jacket.
Okay.
To me, that's semi-formal.
All right.
I'm sure it's something you can look up on the internet.
There's
like a more formal definition, but like that to me is what it.
I looked it up and they sort of kind of look the same, to be honest.
What, formal and semi-formal?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you the picture and let you be.
Like
the
to
judge.
me, formal is like jacket and possibly jacket and tie. Obviously, black tie is like tuxedo, but semi-formal to me is like you need a shirt with a collar and pants that are nicer than jeans. So you don't necessarily need to go button down. You could go like polo situation, as long as it's a nice polo. But I would probably go button down and slacks or khakis if you're a khaki kind of guy.
So I have some really nice. I think I'm gonna have to do it, Craig. I'm gonna have to put it on, man. I'm gonna have to do what Anthony Haney does best.
What's that?
Dress nice.
Okay, just you're. I would say this: you're better off overdressing than underdressing.
Yes.
Over slightly. Like if you show up in a tuxedo, you're a clown.
No, I'm not doing that.
Short
We're
of
also
that,
supposed to go out afterwards, and it's just like, do I really want to wear what I'm gonna wear to dinner, to the little lounge we're going to?
But like, what do you want to wear to the lounge?
Something cool, relaxed. And I was thinking jeans at first, but I'm like, I don't want to put on a blazer, so I'm not gonna do that. So I think I'm gonna go with a polo and some nice khakis.
There you go. And just bring it. If you want to bring change clothes, bring change clothes.
See, that's too much.
Too much?
That's too much.
Well, then just, as long as everyone's in the same boat, your crew's all there.
Yes, sir.
It'd just be the semi-formal crew at the club. What's up? Yeah, semi-formal party of 6.
Love wins.
It's time for real things.
Real things.
We're not going to suck this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, phenomenal anecdote today from Magic Johnson. Truly one of the wildest things I've ever heard. Jack Kent Cooke obviously was the owner of Washington's football team before Dan Snyder. He bought that team in part after he sold the Lakers, his ownership profile shifted over the years. He had the Lakers at one point, which he sold to Jerry Buss. The first thing Jerry Buss did was draft Magic Johnson. And Magic Johnson tied that all together today as he was introduced as the co-owner of the Commanders.
And then I got to tell you 2 stories how I'm tied to this city, and that's probably why God blessed me with this opportunity. Abe Poland, who used to own the Wizards, was one of my mentors. And then I go back to one of the owners that used to own this team. Jack Kent Cooke had to make the deal with me to then sell the Lakers to Dr. Buss to buy the Washington Redskins. Isn't that something? So I'm supposed to be here and be a part of this incredible franchise. And I would say this, we've been meeting and we're ready for the challenge.
The details of how that actually connects, the story, is a little funky based off the timelines. We're gonna have to request Magic for an interview to tie that all together. But Cook's ownership started 25% in 1961 and became majority owner in 74, sole owner in 85, and so there's a fluctuating thing there. Obviously, Magic and the Lakers is late 70s, early 80s. That's the deal is finalized and comes through. But it's and then Jack Kent Cooke, and convincing Jerry Buss to buy the Lakers. I think Magic was a part of that because he saw the potential in Magic Johnson. Part of this has all been ruined in terms of the details by various dramatized versions of television shows over the years, but certainly ties back through the three that are pretty remarkable. Talk about more celebrations on Monday and look forward to the season. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980.
The Kevin Sheehan Show, now weekdays from 10 to 1.